All right, so back to this. The game crashed. Heard not the game, my computer did. But I got back to where we were. We actually got a secret cutscene, funny enough, but it was just the blood one. I'm pretty sure we've already had it before. Mm. So we got another 20 minutes left. But again, big thing being, yeah, in the last one, we're gonna talk about how again, how she's gained another opportunity to go to school, right? And it's seemingly, a very much what would you call it? Very much a like a gift, I guess. It seemed like it was a very like given how we can assume based on our mother was acting towards the teacher, right? And like bowing for her, right? It was very much, something that wasn't supposed to happen. But again, luckily for her, ended up happening. So just wanted to throw that out there, point that out, right? So yeah, guess that she's. I'm gonna try and see if we can get another secret cutscene because I missed recording the blood one, but again, very just lucky that she's still able to go, right? So and she even Lain even recognizes that based on how her mother was acting. So anyway, right? Finish my water. That's the big thing there. I'm not gonna fucking because again, like it just seems to be so like before we would just wait, but it seems to be just so inconsistent.
学校に行ったら、卒業が決まったから、無理して学校に来なくてもいいって言われた。私が来ると嫌？面倒だから卒業させて、本当にいたいの。でも、もう二度と行かないから。
This is interesting. This is interesting. Again, because we know Kamiya-san, her teacher, right? The one who was talking with her parents. Um, again, right? Seemingly let her go back to school, right? But I think like this is really interesting because I think you can interpret this in like many ways. So like the first thing is again, we know that Lane was skipping school, right? And this was due to well, it all started kind of, with the whole like kind of misunderstanding with her and Tomo, right? And kind of her and Kyoko having a falling out, kind of leading to, I guess, Kyoko and her friends or whatever, some other group like kind of bullying her, right? So that's kind of the background, or setting or like context or situation for all this. Then that leads to her ditching, and skipping school and class because she doesn't want to be there, right? And especially since she are falling out with Kyoko, Tomo transferred to a different school. She doesn't really have anyone, right? As she said, she's alone at a recess and lunch. So there's that there, right? So she just doesn't go. Her teacher, Kamiya, picks up on this, right? And ends up talking to her parents, right, about that, probably just letting them know and catching them up to speed regarding Lane's current situation. This is what led to her dad talking to her, and presumably, again, what we again, we know he's a good dad, right? Talking to her about kind of again just life in general, right? And then almost what it really is him kind of acknowledging like her problems and kind of what she's going through in like the present moment from this, right? Or just based off of this. So again, that's a thing there for that, right? Even if nothing happens. But then we do know that Kamiya comes back, and with her mother bowing, right? Something where he was able to kind of pull strings to get her to go to school, or to like to continue allow her to go in school. I think the interesting thing though, and that's coming of this one, he talks to her directly and says, you don't actually need to be here. You don't need to come to school. You can still graduate. Now, what I think in my sneaking suspicion is that similar to her parents kind of being good parents, I think Kami as a good teacher kind of recognizes what's going on and realizes that, Lane, again, she's an extremely smart and capable person, right? Competent person, especially if he's kind of aware of what's going on with her, like therapy and or counseling. But again, she's clearly having a rough time at school. So it's something to where she is definitely more than qualified to graduate and move on to high school, right? But it's something to where it may be best if that she weren't in the school physically, right? And was doing some of the stuff more like, online and virtual and digital, right? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Like we see that movies. So I think that's where, because I think that's where he's coming from in saying that. And it's interesting because when Lane hears it, she kind of takes it as he doesn't want to deal with her, right? Which again is her lack of self esteem and lack of self confidence speaking, rather than she's more than capable enough given her intelligence, and what she can do, right, to just straight up graduate and move on without needing to worry about coming to any more classes, especially if she's a last like whatever third year, right? So I think it's very interesting there to where, kind of how all this is being set up and kind of the very I'd say, I don't want to say quick, but the very, sudden transition from her again, want like being sick and wanting to go to school and that kind of being everything in her motivation to get back to very much okay, all of a sudden she doesn't really have anything there anymore, just based on a few events, which we talked about isn't out of the question, right? Or that's not really that what's the term? I don't want to say surprising, but it's not really that far-fetched because we know normal people, right? They'll have kind of a falling out with some friends or some, drama or beef or issues that they'll eventually get over. But someone who's in kind of as fragile, I guess is a good way to put it, of a mental and or, what would you call it, psychological state as Lane, it's something where that's kind of devastating for her. So we really kind of see that. Again, I find this very interesting. So this is 37. And then we have another lab coming up. So let's see. And again, this is her questioning kind of her place in the world, which is a very intense thing to be doing as a middle schooler, right? You know, I never really had these kind of conversations, I like for me it was something to where I guess my introduction to this kind of stuff was for my fucking supporting coursework in college, which was philosophy, right? But it's something where her asking these questions in middle school, because it's what would you call it? It's kind of like what I used to describe the completely unrelated and different series, but in Omori, right? It's kind of the hypocrisy and contradiction regarding, Sonny and Basil, right? In The Apologist, because it's something to where if they were smart enough to do what they did, then it means they were also self-aware enough to know that it was wrong, right? If they were intelligent enough and or capable enough to come up with the idea, then it means they were also knew that it was wrong at the same time, right? It's kind of a similar thing here to where she's smart enough to, know about this, and think about this, right? Again, going into that kind of existentialism, I don't want to say like nihilism because that's like, even that's like uh, more so kind of question her place, right? She's smart enough to know that, but being smart enough about that at such a young age again makes her more susceptible to kind of that line of thought and that, mode of thinking. So just interesting to note, very interesting to bring up, right? So again, and we got quite a bit, few more Lane diaries, right? So the Navi.
名前をつけた。レイン、もう一人の自分。たった一人の友達。でも、中学に行ったら、本当
Oh,
の友
she's
達
not even in.
真面目な感じ明るくすれば嫌われないかな。
Okay, this is interesting because I saw the term Navi, but it's questionable whether she's even talking about her computer. It's quite possible, it's kind of she's kind of grown to accept, I guess, or acknowledge her other self as like a part of her, right? Or she could actually be referring to, the Navi, right? So again, it's something to where it's like, also apparently she's not even in middle school, like Jesus Christ, but because then the thing there is because we know in fucking the show she's in middle school, but so you could make the argument that okay, this takes place before the show, but there's also, it's something to where it's like she doesn't get the Navi until we see her get it in the show. So again, it's like, I'm not gonna say like this. I still think it's probably like an alternate, parallel like version. I don't think they're chronological, but it is interesting and raise that question there. But so I mean, we'll see. We're just carrying on, right? So
本当に父をお父さんにしたら、いろいろ難しい設定をやってくれてつながるようになった。お父さん、いろんな本を読んで、
damn.
二人で5時間ぐらいかかってつながったとき、お父さんとお母さんも大喜び。家族3人でこんなに喜んだことってしばらくなかったんだって気づいた。私が学校に行かなくなったりして、それからお父さんとお母さんと楽しくなくなっちゃったんだよね。ごめんなさい。
Again, that last line is interesting because it's like, I talk about like, okay, bringing it back to Amoy, right? Completely off topic. Like people like to shit on Sonny's dad, but it's like, dude, you know how it feels like to be a father, losing your 15-year-old daughter, right? It's like, again, I feel a lot of people, just I guess don't get that, or another, flaw of Sonny and Basil apologist, right? But the bigger thing here and what it comes down to this is just as a parent in general, you want to see your kids succeed, right? Obviously, I'm not a parent, but I am, a kid now, young adult who I feel like is doing fairly well for themselves. Like I feel like I'm doing pretty well for myself right now. And I feel like, if you had to ask my parents, they'd probably be proud of me or like, proud of what I become or will potentially become in the future. But it's something to where again, you as a parent, you want like I don't think there are parents out there who don't unless they're just deadbeats and shitbags, right? They want to see their kid succeed, right? They want to see their kid do better than them. I mean, that's the whole point. You want the next generation to do better than the previous one, right? But it's something to where it's like, so something like Lane in her situation kind of being, I guess, definitely, mentally ill, having kind of her issues, right? Um, psychological issues and not being able to go to school because of them, it's kind of, it's heartbreaking for a parent, right? Because it's like they likely didn't have to deal with any of that. So seeing their kid deal with it, and especially something that inhibits them like that, like it's sad to see, but it's something to where again you need to make do. And again, like with the whole Navi thing, like there are other things you can find. I guess what would you call it that can help out with that, right? Or that can you know be supplementary. I guess is a good way to put it towards that. It could supplement that experience. It seems like the Navi, right? That's a good example of that, right? Especially as they're entering the digital and virtual age or visual, right? Because it's like chances are her parents didn't have that, right? Because this is right at about the time where it's starting to become big. So it's interesting to note there. And then another thing again, is what would you call it? Along with that, I think the interesting thing to note is we've already seen the movie regarding Lane using the Navi. So it's just kind of interesting to note in terms of she's already at least seems to be or very quickly catches on and becomes quite proficient with the Navi, right? So anyway, I guess we'll see.
パークって不思議。ここなら顔も見せなくできるし、恥ずかしくない。
Look at the background noise.
違う自分になりそう。いろんな人がいて、私なんかトラブルだらけで困っていると、親切な人がいっぱいいて、私がこんなに親切にしてもらえるなんて、嬉しくて仕方がない。
And again, the big and interesting thing here being that we can already see kind of her attraction to the net, right, in the internet. And again, the thing there being that it's like, yeah, we see that, and then it's also like, what would you call it? Yeah, we see that, and then it's like, what's the term? Yeah, we can already see the impact that that's kind of having, and her, being more, I guess, what would you call it, inclined to partake in that online, world, right? I guess even if it's not called the Wired. And the interesting thing, her being talking about, she almost feels like a different person, kind of alludes to her doppelganger self, right? Maybe that's when she truly comes out, and starts to take over, during again these periods where she's like online. So yeah, let's do this lab. Let me save again because the computer already crashed once, right? don't want to necessarily risk it happening again, right? So yeah, there's that.
神経症も知ってるの？すごいわね、レイン。今度はレインにカウンセリングしてもらおうかな。言葉だけだよ。意味なんてよくわからない。どんな意味だち？神経が変になっておかしくなる病気？いい線いってるね。ひどい先生。もう教えてくれないの？違うのよ。本当にいい線いってるの。本当は神経症って体の原因がなくて何かを怖がったり、何かに脅迫されてるような気がすることで、ストレスを感じて病気になっちゃうものなの。心の中だけの病気？昔はそう考えられていた。でも研究してみたら、自律神経系の不安定が伴うことが多くて、だから体の中の神経がおかしくなっているんじゃないかって考えがあるの。体にも影響が出るものを心身症って言って区別していたんだけど、そうじゃないって定義されていたはずの神経症も、実は体に関係していたって分かってきたの。心身症って？あんまりいっぱい聞くと頭がパンクしちゃうわよ。ほら、ストレスで痩せちゃったり、頭にハゲが出ちゃったって聞いたことない？あれのことよ。ねえ、まさか。違うよ。そんなのないよ。よかった。うちは災いのもとね。
Okay, so I think the interesting thing is, first off, again, Lain proving yet again of her own ability and competence when it comes to like her understanding and level of self-awareness regarding this stuff. Again, Toko making the comment that Lane's gonna need to start counseling her, right? But then it's also something to where, again, the and where the conversation takes a turn towards, and what's interesting is kind of talking about that condition, how it applies to Lane, and specifically, and how the mind and body are connected. Because I mean, okay, it's within the mind, but it's based on the neurological like network that exists within the brain and is a tangible physical thing. And it's also something where, again, talking about like more obvious, applications. But the point being that, again, with the mind body connected, there's potential to fix the mind based on the body, right? As opposed to it being solely, a mental and psychological thing, I think is the interesting thing. That wasn't something I guess that Lane caught up on, or, but again, it does raise that possibility of potential, right? And then the other thing there kind of being, what would you call it? Her talking about what's the term? But again, what shoot, I was gonna say I'm completely blanking. But again, relating this to some of Lane's most recent diaries, again, something to where she feels as though this is kind of like pointless, right? That there's no real reason to it. Like it's probably just kind of cementing that fact, and really, I guess, are we gonna get a diagnosis? Okay, we are, or we actually get in our lab, and then a counseling recording. We'll do this counseling, and then that last diagnosis, and then we'll end it, right? I think that's fair.
病名って誰が決める？それぞれのお医者さんね。ただ、一応の基準はあるのよ。ICD や DSM っていう国際基準があって、ある程度、こういう症状の時はきっとこんな病気だろうって。レインが思っているように、心の中はもともとよくわからないものだから、毎年のようにいろんな報告があって、少しでも診断に役立てるようにデータが集められて分類されていってるの。わからない？先生でも？本当のところ、先生たちにも全くわからないことばかりなの。例えば、あるケースにおいて、以前こうしたら治ったからその方法を取ろうとか、結構経験的なものだったりするの。治るかどうかもわからないのに？そう。治るかどうかなんてわからないの。ただ、こうしたら治ったとか、こうしたら危険が少ないとか、そういうことでしかないケースが大半なの。でもね、患者さんにとってもだけど、基本的に治ることが大事で、そのメカニズムを調べることは別の研究なのよ。そうなんだ。 全て分かってしまえばいいのにね。
So again, I think in going based off of what I talked about for the last one, right? Again, and kind of going all the way back to Lane, kind of, seeing through, Toko's act in a sense, right? It's something to where, again, this one, Toko's pretty much, inadvertently confessing, where it's like, that there's no real way to know, if what they're doing is actually helping and or can, or if the person can even be helped and or cured, right? The whole conversation regarding disease naming is interesting, right? It's usually the old, oh, you don't want a disease named after yourself, right? Because chances are, it ain't gonna end up, or work out too well for you. But a big thing there is yeah, the more interesting and obviously what we've seen applied is okay, her pretty much inadvertently saying, yeah, there's no way to know if what they're doing, like they don't really know that much. There's no way to know if what they're doing is actually, helpful and can, help and or uh Jesus inadvertently cure patients, right? So again, with Lane kind of getting that, that answer herself, right? As she had already kind of suspected, and I guess it's just confirming that to her, right? So that, they don't really know what they're doing, I guess, in a sense. So yeah, let's see. Let's do a lab, right? And then we'll or diagnosis and then we'll end. So this will be very interesting.
ダイアントの興味は精神病理にしか他の話題に関しては、無関心とまではいかないものの、興味を示さない。質問攻めにはやや疲れたが、何かしら得意な分野を持つことで、自我が評価されたり、自己の過小評価がなくなる可能性は非常に高い。また、こうした症状を持つ第三者のケースと比較することで、客観的に自己を確認できる。
Again, which to be fair could be the case, I think, based on her analysis, but we know kind of what we're also getting is that, I think Lane's kind of seeing through and realizing that, oh, oh, I just want to see this movie. That, what would you call it? That they really don't seem to know what they're doing, at least for as what it seems like from her perspective. So, dude, I fucking it. Because this is the one I see in all the fucking memes. And then again, the Navi and the computer, right? Yeah, just showing how competent she is there. But again, right with that, we're gonna save and then end it. We don't really have much else to go over for this one. We'll do more in the next one. So, but with that, right, don't really have anything else to say or do. So, yep, that's it for this one. See you in the next one.